Buckwheat, Wikipedia article audio. Buckwheat, also known as common buckwheat, Japanese buckwheat, and silver hull buckwheat, is a plant cultivated for its grain-like seeds and as a cover crop. A related and more bitter species, Phagopyrum tautaricum, a domesticated food plant common in Asia, but not as common in Europe or North America, is also referred to as buckwheat. Despite the name, buckwheat is not related to wheat, as it is not a grass. Instead, buckwheat is related to sorrel, knotweed, and rhubarb. Because its seeds are eaten and rich in complex carbohydrates, it is referred to as a pseudo-cereal. The cultivation of buckwheat grain declined sharply in the 20th century with the adoption of nitrogen fertilizer that increased the productivity of other staples. Etymology. History. The name buckwheat or beechwheat comes from its triangular seeds, which resemble the much larger seeds of the beech nut from the beech tree, and the fact that it is used like wheat. The word may be a translation of Middle Dutch boekweit, bosie, beech, and white, wheat, or may be a native formation on the same model as the Dutch word. The wild ancestor of common buckwheat is F. esculentum ssp ancestral. F. homotropicum is interfertile with F. esculentum, and the wild forms have a common distribution, in Yunnan, a southwestern province of China. The wild ancestor of Tartary buckwheat is F. tautaricum ssp potanini. Common buckwheat was domesticated and first cultivated in inland Southeast Asia, possibly around 6000 BCE, and from there spread to Central Asia and Tibet, and then to the Middle East and Europe. Domestication most likely took place in the western Yunnan region of China. Buckwheat is documented in Europe and Finland by at least 5300 BCE as a first sign of agriculture, and in the Balkans by circa 4000 BCE in the Middle Neolithic. Russian speakers call buckwheat meaning of Greece, due to its introduction in the 7th century by the Byzantine Greeks. The same is the case in Ukrainian and Lithuanian. The oldest remains found in China so far date to circa 2600 BCE, while buckwheat pollen found in Japan dates from as early as 4000 BCE. It is the world's highest elevation domesticate, being cultivated in Yunnan on the edge of the Tibetan Plateau or on the plateau itself. Buckwheat was one of the earliest crops introduced by Europeans to North America. Dispersal around the globe was complete by 2006, when a variety developed in Canada was widely planted in China. In India, buckwheat flour is known as Kutto Ka Atta and is culturally associated with the Navaratri festival. On the day of this festival, food items made only from buckwheat are consumed. Buckwheat, a short-season crop, does well on low fertility or acidic soils, but the soil must be well drained. Too much fertilizer, especially nitrogen, reduces yields. In hot climates it can be grown only by sowing late in the season, so that it blooms in cooler weather. The presence of pollinators greatly increases the yield. The nectar from buckwheat flour makes a dark-colored honey. It is sometimes used as a green manure, as a plant for erosion control, or as wildlife cover and feed. Cultivation. The plant has a branching root system with one primary root that reaches deeply into the moist soil. Buckwheat has triangular seeds and produces a flower that is usually white, although can also be pink or yellow. Buckwheat branches freely, as opposed to tillering or producing suckers, causing a more complete adaptation to its environment than other cereal crops. The seed hull density is less than that of water, making the hull easy to remove. Buckwheat is raised for grain where a short season is available, either because it is used as a second crop in the season, or because the climate is limiting. Buckwheat can be a reliable cover crop in summer to fit a small slot of warm season. It establishes quickly, which suppresses summer weeds. Buckwheat has a growing period of only 10–12 weeks and it can be grown in high latitude or northern areas. It grows 30 to 50 inches tall. Historical data. A century ago, the Russian Empire was the world leader in buckwheat production. Growing areas in the Russian Empire were estimated at 6.5 million acres, followed by those of France at 0.9 million acres. In 1970, the Soviet Union grew an estimated 4.5 million acres of buckwheat. It remains in 2014 a key cereal. Production in China expanded greatly during the 2000s, to rival Russia's output. In the northeastern United States, buckwheat was a common crop in the 18th and 19th centuries. Cultivation declined sharply in the 20th century due to the use of nitrogen fertilizer, to which maize and wheat respond strongly. Over 1 million acres were harvested in the United States in 1918. By 1954, that had declined to 150,000 acres, and by 1964, the last year annual production statistics were gathered by USDA, only 50,000 acres were grown. However, it may benefit from an explosion in popularity of so-called ancient grains reported in the years 2009 to 2014. In 2015, world production was 2.0 million tons, led by Russia with 43% of the world total and China with 25%. Production. Salicylaldehyde was identified as a characteristic component of buckwheat aroma. 2,5-dimethyl-4-hydroxy-3-furanone, 2,4-decadienyl, phenylacetaldehyde, 2-methoxy-4-vinylphenol, 2-nonenal, decanal and hexanol also contribute to its aroma. They all have odor activity value more than 50, but the aroma of these substances in an isolated state does not resemble buckwheat. Composition. In a 100-gram serving providing 343 calories dry and 92 calories cooked, buckwheat is a rich source of protein, dietary fiber, 4B vitamins and several dietary minerals, with content especially high in niacin, magnesium, manganese, and phosphorus. Buckwheat is 72% carbohydrates, including 10% dietary fiber, 3% fat, and 13% protein. Herb. As buckwheat contains no gluten, it may be eaten by people with gluten-related disorders, such as celiac disease, non-celiac gluten sensitivity or dermatitis herpetiformis. Nevertheless, buckwheat may have gluten contamination. Cases of severe allergic reactions to buckwheat and buckwheat-containing products have been reported. Nutrition. Buckwheat contains fluorescent phototoxic phagopyrins. Seeds, flour, and teas are generally safe when consumed in normal amounts. However, buckwheat may cause phagopyrism in people with diets mainly based on the consumption of buckwheat herbs, sprouts, and particularly flours or phagopyrin-rich buckwheat extracts. Symptoms of phagopyrism in humans may include skin inflammation in sunlight-exposed areas, cold sensitivity, and tingling or numbness in the hands. The fruit is an achene, similar to sunflower seed, with a single seed inside a hard outer hull. The starchy endosperm is white and makes up most or all of buckwheat flour. The seed coat is green or tan, which darkens buckwheat flour. The hull is dark brown or black, and some may be included in buckwheat flour as dark specks. The dark flour is known as blé noir in French, along with the name Saracen. Buckwheat noodles have been eaten by people from Tibet and northern China for centuries, as wheat cannot be grown in the mountain regions. A special press made of wood is used to press the dough into hot boiling water when making buckwheat noodles. Old presses found in Tibet and Shaanxi share the same basic design features. The Japanese and Koreans may have learned the making of buckwheat noodles from them. In India, on Hindu fasting days, fasting people in northern states of India eat foods made of buckwheat flour. Eating cereals such as wheat or rice is prohibited during such fasting days. However, since buckwheat is not a cereal, it is considered acceptable for consumption during Hindu fasting days. While strict Hindus do not even drink water during their fast, others just give up cereals and salt and take a meal prepared from non-cereal ingredients such as buckwheat. The preparation of buckwheat flour varies across India. Well-known buckwheat flour recipes are kuttu ki puri and kuttu pakaras. In most of the northern and western states, buckwheat flour is called kuttu ka atta. Buckwheat noodles play a major role in the cuisines of Japan, Korea, and the Valtellina region of northern Italy. Soba noodles are the subject of deep cultural importance in Japan. In Korea, guksu were widely made from buckwheat before it was replaced by wheat. The difficulty of making noodles from flour with no gluten has resulted in a traditional art developed around their manufacture by hand. Gluten concerns. Buckwheat groats are commonly used in Western Asia and Eastern Europe. The porridge was common, and is often considered the definitive peasant dish. It is made from roasted groats that are cooked with broth to a texture similar to rice or bulgur. The dish was brought to America by Ukrainian, Russian, and Polish immigrants who called it kasha, and they mixed it with pasta or used it as a filling for cabbage rolls, knishes, and blintzes. Buckwheat prepared in this fashion is thus most commonly called kasha in America. Groats were the most widely used form of buckwheat worldwide during the 20th century, eaten primarily in Estonia, Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and Poland, called greka in Ukrainian or Russian. The groats can also be sprouted and then eaten raw or cooked. Negative reactions. Buckwheat pancakes, sometimes raised with yeast, are eaten in several countries. They are known as buckwheat blinis in Russia, galettes in France, ploys in Acadia, and books in the Wallonia region of Belgium. Similar pancakes were a common food in American pioneer days. They are light and foamy. The buckwheat flour gives them an earthy, mildly mushroom-like taste. In Ukraine, yeast rolls called hrycheniki are made from buckwheat. Buckwheat flour is also used to make Nepali dishes such as dedu and kashhyamba. Farina made from groats are used for breakfast food, porridge, and thickening materials in soups, gravies, and dressings. In Korea, buckwheat starch is used to make a jelly called memilmuk. It is also used with wheat, maize, or rice in bread and pasta products. Buckwheat is a good honey plant, producing a dark, strong monofloral honey. In recent years, buckwheat has been used as a substitute for other grains in gluten-free beer. Although it is not an actual cereal, Buckwheat can be used in the same way as barley to produce a malt that can form the basis of a mash that will brew a beer without gliadin or hordein, and therefore can be suitable for celiacs or others sensitive to certain glycoproteins. Uses: food, beverages, beer. Buckwheat SHCH is a Japanese distilled beverage produced since the 16th century. The taste is milder than barley SHCH. Buckwheat tea, known as memil cha in Korea and soba cha in Japan, is a tea made from roasted buckwheat. Buckwheat hulls are used as filling for a variety of upholstered goods, including pillows and zafu. The hulls are durable and do not conduct or reflect heat as much as synthetic filling. They are sometimes marketed as an alternative natural filling to feathers for those with allergies. However, medical studies to measure the health effects of pillows manufactured with unprocessed and uncleaned hulls concluded that such buckwheat pillows do contain higher levels of a potential allergen that may trigger asthma in susceptible individuals than do new synthetic-filled pillows. Buckwheat is currently being studied and used as a pollen and nectar source to increase natural predator numbers to control crop pests in New Zealand. Whiskey, SHCH, tea, upholstery filling, biological control.